Welcome to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast, where we focus on how authors found success, looking at strategies that have taken them to the top of the bestseller charts, as well as what they've learned from their mistakes. Because being an indie author is more than knowing the latest marketing trend. It's about being innovative and creative and learning from your mistakes.
I'm Sarah Rosette.
And I'm Jami Albright. And this week we have
Laura Durham.
Fun interview.
Yeah, I've known Laura for years. She was traditionally published. And so I knew her kind of back in that traditional publishing world. And now she's indie and writing cozies. And she's branched into a new pen name. She talks about that and the differences in writing the two books and how
because they're different genres,
right? Completely different genres, and how it's influenced the writing of each type of series. How they other, I guess is what you'd say. So, and she talks. So we asked her about getting her rights back because she got her rights back and how she did that. So lots.
And let me tell you, the woman was persistent.
Yes, and I think that's the key. I think that's the key from what we've heard from a couple of people.
Yeah, I do too. What's been going on with you?
Okay, so I feel like I'm drowning in admin.
Yeah.
All those things that I put off
while you were
until I
writing
got the book done. Yeah, and that's kind of how I work well, is I focus and I get whatever I'm focused on done. Mm-hmm. But now I feel like all this is just,
coming back.
I have this huge list, and I'll describe it. I usually do a to-do list, like a list. And I had I have all these different projects that I'm working on. So I went and got this, and I have like all these I have this huge sheet of paper, and I was like, okay, I'm just going to put down all my tasks, and I'm going to list each thing. And so I have it's like a mind map to-do list. And so as long as I can mark something off each stack each day, I'm okay.
Yeah. So there you go. Everybody works
I'm working on that. Yeah. But I feel like this could be the podcast update, because I did get to do some driving. And so I'm caught up on so many of my podcasts. I'm so happy. Yeah. So I listened to one from Kobo about audio.
Yes.
And I'll link to that in the show notes about if you want to have an audio production company do your audio. And they talk about if you want to narrate it yourself. And the Ingram Spark podcast I listened to this week. It's all about getting into print, getting into bookstores and libraries. So if you have questions, I'll link to that. And it explains, they talk about the discounts and returnability, all the questions people have. So, and it's not very long. It's only about 30 minutes, I think. Yeah. So what about you?
I'm writing, but we're in the middle of a family thing, in that my daughter's pregnant and due pretty soon, but she's kind of having some preterm labor stuff so I've had to come up here to help her, and not have to. I want to. And I do want to say that this is one of the benefits of doing this job. I can do this job anywhere. So if I come up here to help her and I don't get anything done, that's my fault, because her other kids are sleeping. I mean, in the evenings, her husband's home, so I can go write. So if I don't, it's on me. But that is one of the benefits of being able to do this,
the flexibility,
do this job. Yeah, the flexibility and stuff. But I've also been reading.
Yeah.
So I don't know, a few weeks ago, probably a month ago, I was really wanting something paranormal, and paranormal romance or urban fantasy series or something like that. And so I just kind of put a call out, and people gave me suggestions. And I will tell you that there were a lot. I started and stopped 4 books because I just, they just didn't do it for me, or they hadn't been edited, whatever. But on the plus side of that, there are people that still love those books. So,
every book has its own audience. Yeah.
But one of the ones was From Blood to Ash, I think. Let me look, because I want to get it right.
Okay.
And by Jennifer L. Armentrout, and yes, From Blood and Ash, and then the second one is Kingdom of Flesh and Fire. Mm-hmm. And I have just lost myself in these books.
That's great.
They have been so good, but they are paranormal, but they're also fantasy. They're a little bit fantasy too. But just really good. And I really wasn't sure when I started because the heroine is like 18 and I tend to like my heroines a little bit older, but it's not, maybe because it is, you know, fantasy and paranormal and not set in normal times. She's not particularly immature, you know, there are a few things, but it's just really interesting. It's a cool world. I mean, it's a dark world, but it's still really, I've just really enjoyed it. So that's going to be my paranormal fantasy recommendation if anybody gets a chance to read something like that. So,
That's
you know,
great.
of course, when I'm reading, and I'm actually reading, I'm not listening to it. So when I'm reading a book, I really get into it. So that's been hard sometimes to break away from that to go write my romantic comedy. But yeah, so that's what I'm doing.
Two different worlds. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just real life stuff. I mean, this is just real life stuff. It would be great if we could write in a vacuum. Well, it wouldn't be great for me, but for a lot of people,
you would not like that.
No, I would not. But it would be great if we could just work in a vacuum, no distractions, no nothing.
Right.
But the fact is, life is real. And right now, with COVID and everything, it seems more real. And, you know, we're all just kind of together. And so we just have to come up with different ways to get stuff done. So,
I also read a book this week. It's the Enola Holmes book because, you know, that Netflix series is coming out, or movie, I guess Netflix movie is coming out. And I'm such a completist.
The 23rd of September.
Okay, so you're not waiting for it or anything, are you?
No, it's not. I mean, I'm probably not going to read the books until the movie comes out, but I might, because it just seems so cool.
Yeah, it does look cool. And so I hadn't read the books. They're actually like, I guess they'd be like young adult books or
I think
young reader. But the main character is 14 in the books, I think. But see, I'm a completist. So I like to read the book and then watch the movie. So I got the first book and it is so good. And it's really short. And, you know, I was looking at it going, wow, this is so tiny. But it shows you what you can do in such a short amount of, you know, time. And it's a really good story. So now I'm looking forward to it even more. And it's really well written. It's got all this, Sherlock Holmes stuff. So if you like that, that's in there. But then it's got all this stuff about like, it really explores like her mom and the Sherlock and Mycroft are her older brothers. And got a bunch of stuff about like women's dress and how that influenced how they lived and what they did. And it's just really, really good. So.
Right. I'll probably have to listen to it. Maybe just get them to listen to. But I will say, I am looking forward to the Netflix series. I mean, Henry Cavill, please.
Looks pretty good.
As Sherlock Holmes. Oh, my. And, so I'm very excited about it. I'm all aflutter.
All right. Well, we better get to the interview.
Yes, we should. Yeah. We should. We hope you guys are doing well.
Yes.
Stay safe.
Yes. And so here's Laura. Today, we're really excited to have Laura Durham with us. Laura Durham has been writing for as long as she can remember and has been plotting murders since she began planning weddings. The idea behind the Annabelle Archer Wedding Planner Mysteries in the first book in the series, Better Off Wed, was born from the overwhelming desire to murder a particularly unpleasant mother of the bride. Once Laura realized that killing her would be bad for business, she decided to do away with her on paper. So we're really glad to have you here.
Thank you.
And that we're not doing this interview from prison. So the women's penitentiary.
Right.
So that's really good. So Laura, tell us what genres you write in and how did you get into writing?
Sure. I write in cozy mystery and sci-fi romance, which are pretty different genres. And I got into writing probably like a lot of authors. Like I've always been writing and took a lot of creative writing in college, then got a real world job to, pay the bills. And it was wedding planning. So I started a wedding planning business. But I did have this one mother of the bride that just drove me to distraction. She was really a challenge. And I did have to kind of release some energy. And so I wrote this scene where she died, a horrible death. And it felt so good. I thought, I could do more of this. So I did. I took a class on how to write a mystery, learned to structure it. And that's how Better Off Wed came to be. And actually the 3 first books in that series were published by Avon Books.
Oh, okay.
So I did a trad deal. And so I was published traditionally for the first 3 and then brought them out indie almost a decade later.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
So when were they first published?
2005.
Okay.
So 2005, 2006, 2007, the one a year type of traditional deal.
Yeah. And then were you writing between 2007 and now, or whenever you put those out?
I was, but so what happened was I got the 3-book deal. The first book won the Agatha for Best First Novel, which was great. Yeah. And then a few months later, they slashed their mid-list. So Avon cut almost all their mysteries. So I basically finished the 3rd book, but I didn't have any more books out there, didn't have a deal. So I built myself a shed in the backyard, stomped out there independently, and just wrote for myself for a while. And I had a 6-month-old and a 2-year-old at the time. So it was really a kind of a good break. But I didn't get back into really writing for the series until about 2016.
Okay.
And that was when I decided to try to get my rights back and really bring out more in the series, because I'd unfortunately ended the 3rd book on a cliffhanger because I didn't know it was the 3rd book. I didn't know it was the last one. So it ended kind of with this. And so I got emails from writers over the years asking when the next one would be out. And I felt really bad. So my intention was really just to put out a book just to satisfy the readers who want to know what happened next.
Mm-hmm. Well, so would you say that the trad deal was your first big success?
It was definitely a big success. And winning the Agatha was a big deal at the time. And it has been really, really helpful moving into indie to have that.
It's still a big deal. Yeah.
It was a big deal. And it was great. But it is one of those, like, the trad was a bit of a kind of a double-edged sword. It was great because I got out, but it was very, I didn't have control. Mm-hmm. They can cut you whenever. I didn't make a lot of money, even though I earned out my advance and did all the, the right things. But it's just hard to make money writing cozies for a trad publisher.
Yeah.
Yes, very hard, very difficult. I do remember that phase. It was like cozies became really popular and publishers put out a ton of them. And then all of a sudden, it was like this axe fell, and just so many people lost their publishing house contracts. And so many people were just kind of adrift. And that was back before indie publishing was really a thing.
Right.
So it was a difficult time. Yeah.
Right. There were a lot that went to smaller houses. Mm-hmm. But at the time, I really was just, I did have the wedding planning business, and that was a full-time business. And then I had 2 small children. So the thought of trying to kind of finagle another deal, I decided to take a break. And it ended up being great, because if I had done another deal with a small publisher, I wouldn't have had the freedom really to go indie. And that has been amazing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had sort of a chance to go to a small publisher. It was sort of, I'd won a contest and they wanted the book. Problem was, I just wasn't completely done with the book. And then by the time I realized anything they could do, I could do myself and make more money doing it.
Right.
So, yeah, I'm glad you didn't do that. I'm glad you waited. So tell us what you wish you'd known about writing and craft.
I think one of the big things is that every writer writes differently. And when I did the Clifton Strengths with Becca Syme, who you've had on the show, amazing, I learned that I need to percolate ideas. So I can't write every day. So for me, I need to have a week or 2 to think about a book, or even more, plot it out. And then once I write, I can go like gangbusters. Mm-hmm. But I don't write every day. I do when I'm working on a book, and I do about 4,000 to 5,000 words a day. Mm-hmm. But I then stop and I take a couple of weeks off, and I get my kind of well refilled and really think about the book and plot it out. Mm-hmm. And I think the kind of myth that every writer writes every day can really hold people back, because they think they need to do certain things.
Right.
So I think that was important to me. And then I took a lot of classes. I took one of Dean Wesley Smith's depth in writing classes, which was great. So I think just always learning and trying to better yourself with the craft of writing is important. Mm-hmm. And sometimes people focus so much on the marketing, like they want to put the cart before the horse. And you really have to make sure you have a good product and you're writing a good book before you spend a lot of money to market it.
So we may have already covered this a little bit, but what assumptions did you make at the beginning of your writing career? And looking back, did they turn out to be right or wrong?
Well, definitely, I think one thing we touched about was that getting a trad deal would be the pinnacle. It'd be the answer to all of my, my wishes and dreams. And it was great. And I remember when I did get the deal, I told my agent, I was like, whew, the hard part's done. And he laughed.
You're relaxed now.
He did. He said, oh, sweetie, the hard part is just beginning. And I just had no idea that, and also the traditional publishers don't do a lot of the marketing for you. Even though they have a marketing department, you really, especially if you're one of the mid-list writers, you have to do it yourself. So I all of a sudden had to learn how to do all the things for myself. And so kind of assuming that when you get a traditional deal that it's going to be easier for you, I think is also wrong. Like they may do the cover, they may do the edit. You may have a lot of things that you don't want to do, but when you're indie, you have so much control and you really get that 70%. And it's just such a huge difference. And even, the covers, I remember when they showed me the covers for my traditional books, I thought I had input.
Little did you know.
Yeah. And they were like, oh, this is actually just for you to see. I was like, oh, okay, well, that's good to know. It's just
that's right. Yeah.
All right, I'm just not approval, so that's good. Yeah. So, but I wasn't crazy I wouldn't have done some of the things with the covers. And so I think it's great. Now I do covers and I have total control.
Yes. So you get to have total freedom and higher royalties, which is better. Exactly. There is a little more stress, I think, when you're doing it all yourself, but there's also stress when you're working with a big company and you really don't have that much input and you really don't have that much control. So,
still working with an agent, or was that just for the trad deals?
Well, I don't use him anymore, but we ended things we didn't really end things, but we did. Things were very friendly, meaning he helped me actually get my rights back, which was a little bit of a challenge and took a while. And I basically had to just almost harass them. I think they just gave them to me to get rid of me. And,
shut you up?
Just shut me up. I just sent letters. I sent emails. I just would not leave them alone. So, but he was involved with that process. And he did want to pitch the books to a small publisher. And I said, oh, no. I have this plan. I'm going indie. And he was like, great. If you ever want to go back to trad, I'm here when you need me.
No, that's
and
right.
That was kind of, so if I did have some idea that I felt was only really doable with a traditional publisher, I can't imagine what that would be. I could go back to him.
Right. So have you ever made a mistake that turned out to be a good thing?
I don't know. I mean, that's a hard one. I can't think of any mistake that ended up being great. There are things that like getting a trad deal, which was really great. And then kind of the mistake that at the time, some people said, oh, you need to go ahead and get with a new publisher and don't let the setback knock you down. And I think that was true, but I also think I needed that time. And I needed that time for the indie world to kind of exist.
Yeah. Well, what about the opposite? Have you ever had something that you thought was just like super brilliant, great idea, and then it turned out to be kind of a flop? We've all had them. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Gosh, a total flop. Well, I did do a love triangle in my second and third cozies without knowing that readers despise them. At least my cozy readers did not like that at all. So luckily, when I got the rights back, I did go back in and I removed the hot Scottish band leader that I thought would be such a favorite, and kind of then made the hot cop the one, because that was what the readers loved.
Oh, nice.
So I thought I was doing something fun and different, and they did not agree with me. So, but again, I could go back in and I fixed those right up.
I was going to say, so you did go in and change some things when you got the books back, not just that? Oh yeah, that's good.
The third book, actually, it took an extra year to get that back. So by the time I got it back, I already had 9 books in the series. So I was up to book 9.
Oh, wow.
So I couldn't really release it as book 3 because too much had happened.
Yeah.
I couldn't back. So I rewrote most of it, gave it a pretty thorough rewrite, and then it was book 10.
Oh, wow.
So I was able to take those things out, kind of change enough. I wanted to actually change the killer, but I decided not to do that because I thought that would be a little much for people who had read the third one already.
Yeah.
So what about your longtime fans? Did they recognize that book, or did you get any comments on the rewritten book?
It's funny. they kind of liked the rewritten version. I had people who did say, and I told them, I said, this is the third book that's been rewritten. But most of them went back and read it anyway, because it was slotted in at a different point, and the relationships with all the characters had developed, and there were even new characters. And so I put those in. So it was different enough that they found it good the second time. And it had been about a decade for most people.
Yeah.
So.
Well, but I think that's so important. I mean, you just weren't precious with that. I talk about that a lot. We just can't be precious with things. If we know that there's, you knew your readers didn't love that, you changed the triangle. And then when you took the book and you rewrote it, I'm sure you maybe took out some things you really liked to put in new things. And, but you did it because it was a good business decision, and it was true to the series and the story. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think, there are things that I've gotten reader feedback that they don't like or do like, and that I'll take that into consideration as I write the next books. And if I love something, I have a big folder, which I call my merciless edits. And and so in my mind, I'm not throwing it all away. Right. I'm just saving it for later. And I never go back to it. But that way I can rip out parts and tear the book apart, or pull things out that I might have spent a lot of time on and normally would be attached to. Right. I just put them in that folder.
That's great.
That's what I do too. It makes me feel less sad when I have to cut things, because I'm like, I'll just save these over here. And I don't know that I've ever gone back and pulled anything out of that file, but I haven't.
But it's knowing it's there makes you feel better.
Right. Yeah. Actually, the prologue to this book that I just put out was too long. It was really long. I think it was 5,500 words. It was a lot. Wow. And so my editor, she really advised me to cut it. So I did, but I kept the 5,500 word one. And actually, I'm going to put that out in my newsletter when it comes out next, just because it's been enough time now. And I'm just going to let people see what the rest of the story basically that happened in the prologue.
Yeah, I bet they'll love it.
Yeah, I think it's just because they like behind the scenes things.
For sure.
I think,
That's a great idea.
So we're going to transition it a little bit into the specific questions we have for you. And so we've talked about your transition from traditional to indie, but were there other? Did you have to change your mindset? I mean, like what things did you really have to do to go from being a traditionally published author to an indie published author?
Sure. Well, I definitely had to kind of get my mind wrapped around a production schedule. So all of a sudden, the publishing company was not doing my editing. They weren't doing page proofs. None of that was being done. So I had to kind of figure out, okay, back it out. If I want this book to release this day, I have to have it to the editor and the cover done, and all of that. All that information, I think, can be overwhelming if you don't schedule it in and realize what your lead time is for different elements.
How are you maintaining your production schedule while virtually schooling your children, which I know you're doing because you told us before we got on? I mean, that's a new challenge right now for a lot of authors because, their kids aren't at school, and those hours between 8 and 3 or 8 and 4 were the times that they got their writing in.
Right. It's definitely an adjustment. I do get up very early. So I get in at least one writing sprint before anyone else is awake, which is lovely. And so that has helped. I'm not a late night writer. I know a lot of writer friends with kids who do.
Yeah, I'm not either. Yeah.
No, I'm done. By the time it's around 8:30 at night, that is it. There's not a creative drop left in my body. So, but I do mornings. And then, and basically, I'm lucky because they're older. They are 13 and 15. So they can, to a certain extent, be independent. So they're each up on laptops and doing that. So in a way, it's much easier than if I had a kindergartner and a 6-year-old, 7-year-old. That would be trickier. But I think it's just about scheduling that time around when you can do things, getting smaller chunks in. Sometimes I may not get a solid hour and a half in. Maybe I'll get 45 minutes. Maybe I'll get less. And just being more flexible. Sometimes I come back and it takes me all day to write 5,000 words. Sometimes I'm done by noon. But if I don't get them done at the beginning, I just keep coming back and keep, 200 at a time, 300 at a time until I get them in.
Right. I'm not, or haven't been, a very good opportunistic writer. Like if I have 30 minutes, I don't tend to just sit down and write because, the stars have to be aligned. The moon has to be in the right phase. I have to be wearing the right thing, to sit down and write. It felt like in the past, but I've been at my daughter's this week, and she has 4 children, and she's pregnant. And so I have had to grab little bits of time, like when the kids nap or when they have, my older grandchild is doing school. So when she's doing that, but I've done the same thing, like 500 words here, 1,000 words there. And then I've hit my goal. And I think that's what's, important. And I've been doing this for a long time, and I'm just now realizing that just grabbing those little nuggets of time to write is important if you can do it. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. And I've always worked when I've kind of been writing as well. Mm-hmm. And so when my children were born, I think I wrote the second book with my daughter on a front carrier sleeping, and my arms kind of curled around her at the keyboard because, when she would fall asleep, that's when I would write. And so I would joke that her morning nap lasted as long as a chapter, because whenever she started crying, the chapter that was it. So I learned to write a certain amount of words in her nap time.
Yeah.
So I think as writers, we have to adjust as hard as it is, since we're creatives. Mm-hmm. But I think, being indie does give us that flexibility. Mm-hmm. So, we can set our own schedule. We can, and during the pandemic, a lot of people have slowed down their publication schedule. Mm-hmm. Or have been able to push back releases. And I think it's important also to give ourselves a little bit of grace, because it is sometimes harder to be creative when the world seems to be imploding.
I think that we have to realize that we can't continue doing exactly like we were before all this happened. But it is important to create, for me, I have to create some sort of routine, even out of the craziness that's going on, for me to be able to get some things done. So I think that's the only way to deal with it for me.
Right.
So going back to getting your books back from the traditional publisher, is there anything that you wish you'd known about that? Any wisdom you could pass on to other people who might be interested in trying that?
Well, I went online, and I think I got I think it was Ally, the Alliance for Independent Authors. I think I found information on their website when I was looking. And I definitely learned just to be persistent, just keep at it. I was definitely kind of given a lot of stumbling blocks to get them because the first 2 books they were fine with. They said, okay, it had been long enough. And I had looked at my contracts very diligently and knew that they were technically out of print. And even though they were ebooks, I kind of purposely let them go really, really fallow. Like I just wasn't pushing anything to them on purpose because I knew I wanted to do this. But the 3rd book, they said, well, we still have copies in the warehouse. And so I said, how many? I'll buy them. I bought them. So I bought all the copies. And then I said, okay, I bought all the copies. And they said, well, now it has to be a year of sales of a certain amount of ebooks. And I said, okay. So then I just hid that book. That book just disappeared from everything, no website and nothing. Mm-hmm. And I did have readers contact me and say, oh, I see that this book is, the 3rd. And I said, no, don't buy that. No, wait, I'll give it to you once I rewrite it. Just wait. So I told everyone, do not buy that book, because at the time I was re-releasing. So I had a book 4, 5, 6, 7, and they would see this 3rd traditionally published paperback or ebook, and they would kind of ask about it. So, and then I exactly a year to the date, I FedExed them a letter saying the sales are below. I would like my rights per our conversation. And they've, a couple more hoops, but finally, I think were just glad to be rid of me. Yeah. So it was just persistence.
Yeah, but it is so tricky because, if you get a deal and you get 3 books or 2 books or whatever, but you want to write more books in that series, if they own the first 2 or 3, it's really tough to market the 3rd, 4th, and 5th, or 5th, 6th, and 7th if they own the first 3. So. Right.
I wouldn't have been able to, I don't know if I would have kept going in the series if I hadn't been able to get the first 3 back, because
I think that's wise. Yeah.
Right. Because I have the first in series free, and that pushes all the sales. If I hadn't been able to market that first book, having a 4th, 5th, and 6th just wouldn't have made any sense.
Right. So did you get the first 2 back before you continued the series, or did you?
I did.
Okay.
I did.
So that makes
I got those
sense.
first 2 back, kind of did a re-edit on them. There are a few things I wanted to tweak. It had been a while. And also I had flip phones.
Yeah, I was going to say, you probably had
I know.
fix the technology. Yeah.
Yeah, so I had to change a few things like that and make them a little less dated. So
yeah.
Oh, that's great. So you've recently added a completely different genre. How do you juggle writing two different genres? So that's the sci-fi romance, right?
Sci-fi romance, yes.
Yeah. Do you have a different marketing tactics for that genre as well?
I do. And, I do like I like writing different things. So I found that writing the sci-fi romance is just such a different structure, such a different type of book. And after writing, I just put out the 16th cozy mystery. So after writing at least a dozen cozies, I was getting a little antsy. And I thought, I've never written a sex scene. My cozies are super, super clean. They're like, not a single curse word, nothing. And I thought, I'm going to do something really different just to see if I can. So I, got the book Romancing the Beat, learned how to, get those romance beats, which are entirely different from mystery. And discovered this genre of sci-fi romance, which I stumbled into and was beyond fascinated. It does not exist in bookstores or any traditional, it's just not there. Yet there are authors doing very, very well with this like niche genre. Although it's grown a little bit, it's definitely not a niche anymore, but I was just fascinated. And I started reading these books and I was like, this is amazing. It's alien romance. I thought it was amazing. I was like, this is so different. So I was like, I wonder if I could write one. And it was really more of like an internal challenge to myself,
right.
Just because I had so much fun with them. And so I kind of thought, well, what if there was an alien space station? The entire purpose was to plan weddings for aliens and humans, because, I have this wedding background. So I decided to pull what I knew into that world. And so, and it took off. It did really well. I did the rapid release, an entirely different strategy, because I wanted to do a KU strategy.
Right.
My cozies were wide. And I did the David Gaughran's kind of his KU strategy, rapid release, put the first one at 99 cents. And then when the third one came out, I did a big sale on the first two. And it really kind of juiced them enough to really stick really well.
That's great. And so you put 3 out at once?
I put one out, then 3 weeks later I put the second, and then about a month later I put the third.
Okay. All right.
Then I continued. So it's been about every month.
Right.
Since then. So that was last July.
Right. Well, I do read sci-fi romance. I don't know if I've read yours, but they're a little bit like crack cocaine. I mean, they really are. Like, I'm like, what is this crack that I'm reading? Because they're just addictive.
And it's like that to write them, I think. Like, I feel like it's like it goes faster. It's,
there are no rules. I mean, you can do anything in space. So
yes, I'm not constrained by anything. I make up things all the time, and it's just so fun and such a contrast from contemporary cozies. So
I saw in your other bio that you are a big Star Trek fan. There's not much sci-fi going on in cozies. So did you enjoy blending? It sounds like you blended in some of the elements that are also in your cozies, but this one is very different.
Yes. And I did bring some elements in without even thinking about it, meaning my cozies are very much the cast of characters. So it's Annabelle and then her best friend who's a caterer and then the hairdresser. So it's a whole crazy bunch of wedding people. And so I ended up with the sci-fi romance kind of doing the same thing. I actually have an alien wedding planner who I love. He's amazing. And so I have this whole cast that I created, which at the time I didn't realize I was doing it, but it was very similar, meaning a very, very strongly character driven, but with all the cool tech stuff that I love from Star Trek and Star Wars. And my first series is a little more Star Trek-y in the sense of it's kind of sleek and spacey and techy. And then the second series I put out is more like Barbarians, Sand Planet type of thing. It's very, very different feel, but really fun. Like just anything goes. So it's just a very different feel. So it's been great because I switch back between the two of them. So before I get tired of writing sex scenes too much, I can go back to the cozies, which are super clean. And then I get a little like, oh, I'd like to write some action. Then I go back to the sci-fi romance.
So the sci-fi romance are in KU, but your other books are wide?
The other books were wide. I recently took the cozies into KU only because it's a little tricky to be pushing the wide really hard and kind of writing and pushing out as much as I am. So, and because the KU strategy worked so well for the sci-fi romance, I agonized about it actually a lot because they have been wide for 3 years now, but I did bring them into KU because there are so many cozies in KU.
But is the first still free or no?
The first is still free.
Oh, really? And that works. That's great.
And well, my reasoning was to launch them into KU. I got a book bub on the first one. So and the others are in KU. So that gave it a big push. But what I do now is when I release a new cozy, I put it wide for a week and have it on my website direct. So people can get it that way just for a few days to a week, and then it goes into KU.
Oh, that's good. That's really smart. Yeah.
I'm trying to kind of keep my Nook readers and my Kobo readers and my Apple readers still happy, but really take advantage of that large KU cozy audience.
Yeah. So have you found people willing to go to your website and buy it direct?
They have been. That's been pretty seamless. It's using the PayHip and BookFunnel kind of combination. That's been really good.
That is awesome. Well, we were talking the other day, and you also mentioned you're doing German translations. So tell us about that. Is there anything you wish you had known about that before you got started?
It's a very involved process. That's, I mean, and I do know some other romance writers who have done it. And I actually was able to get some tips from them because I'm doing the sci-fi romance into the German. And so they gave me some tips, but it is really, you're managing going between the translator and the proofreader, and then from the proofreader back to the translator. And you're kind of the in-between without knowing what language it's all happening in. So there's a lot of trust involved. And so I did, get recommendations before I hired translators and was able to make sure that they were good.
Right.
But it's a lot of research. That was one thing I've learned. I think you're doing it as well. It's just a lot of research.
Yeah. I found someone who says she will do the translation and then she will handle the coordination of the proofread and all that. So at least that's one less thing that I have to keep an eye on. So
I've heard some that do that. But the ones I got were either not willing or it was just easier for me to get someone else. So and I do have two translators working on both of the series at the same time. Wow. So I kind of have these two teams going. But my cover designer is actually German, and she's in Germany, so that's been very seamless. So when I send her all the cover changes in German, she has no problem. So it's been the one little easy thing.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. Well, will you release those into KU as well?
I think I will.
Yeah.
I think that will be a good move for that. And it'll be interesting doing Facebook ads in German. Because one thing with the translation, you have to realize you have to get all of your blurb, and you have to get everything translated. And if you're whatever you want to do for Facebook ads, or your, little text for your keywords, all of that. So there's so many things I keep thinking I need to get that translated too. Oh, I need to get that translated. All the back matter. So,
oh my goodness,
that's a huge project.
It's a big project, but it's exciting.
So you've got your different series you're writing, and then you're doing the translations. So do you have a set pattern that you write one book in this series and one book in this series, or do you just how do you choose which one you're going to write in, or do you have a specific schedule?
I do have a schedule, and I definitely, when I did the sci-fi romance and I launched that, I did kind of scale a little bit back on my number of cozy releases, only because I couldn't put, to launch a new pen name took a lot more time and effort than I'd remembered. And I don't think I would do that again. I think even though I really love the idea of working in different genres, and I might want to do a different genre again, I would have to stick it in one of the pen names, because doing the new website, doing all the newsletters, that was a lot. And I'd forgotten the setup involved in that. So that is the one thing, if you're going to do all of those things for two pen names, it's a lot of work. It really, really is. So I do have a schedule, but now I'm amping up. So I'm doing more of an alternating, whereas I did put out the first year, I put out 16 sci-fi romance. So it was pretty intense how much I was doing for that. So I only put out maybe two cozies that year. Mm-hmm. So it definitely scaled it back. But then, it was just, I kind of was going where both creativity and the money. I mean, I look at it as very much a business, and it's diversifying, and it's kind of, I'm covering a lot of bases by and I do audio and the German. So in that way, even though I'm in KU, it gives me a little bit of a kind of a balance.
Right.
And many streams of income.
How long are your sci-fi romances?
They're about 50,000 to 60,000. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And your cozies?
They're a little bit long, about 60,000.
Oh, really? Okay.
And I do novellas. I like to do cozy novellas. So I'll do a holiday novella. And usually those don't have dead bodies. And my readers actually really enjoy it. Like they'll comment like, oh, it was fun to see a mystery that wasn't a dead body.
Yeah.
And so I have about maybe 5 or 6 novellas in the series.
That's great. Yeah.
And they're just kind of lighter and, mine are already light. They're a little less intense.
Mm-hmm. So do you feel that writing the romances, do they go faster for you? Because it sounds like you were able to put out quite a few right in the beginning.
They do go faster, just in the sense that I don't have to come up with a very intricate way to kill someone. Yeah, I do think they have more dead bodies than most romances because there's sci-fi, there's space battles and different things. So right. I do end up, and I realized I was like, gosh, I kill people more than most romance writers. I think that's just a tendency. That's just that's a mystery writer in me.
It's your cozy showing through.
And the funny thing is also the cozies have gotten more. So I've realized that both have helped each other in the sense that my plotting that I do, like I do a lot of twists in the romance. Like I'll do sometimes like twists at the end or things that are very much from the mystery world. And then I've added more emotional depth in that I think is coming from the romance world into the cozies.
Oh, that's great.
So anyway, they've really helped each other. Mm-hmm. Like the books have improved. Because there is, I don't want to say there's crossover in sci-fi, romance, and cozies, but there is the romance cozy crossovers. So a lot of my cozy readers also do read romance. Mm-hmm. And so as I've kind of, I think, deepened the romantic relationship in the cozies, they've been much happier.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, do your cozy readers know about your sci-fi romances?
They do not. There might be 5 people that would cross over.
Yeah.
I think it would be relatively small.
Yeah.
Although, audiences always surprise you. I have a really large number of my sci-fi romance of older ladies that I didn't think would really, one reader told me that she had to have her teenage granddaughter help her download something of my, my reader magnet. And I thought, oh my gosh, this teenage girl is seeing this man chest cover. And I was like, how old of a teenage?
I know. Well, I don't know if I've told this on here, but one time I got an email from a reader, and she's like, I'm 16 and I love your books and I want to write, but I've read all your books. And there was a part of me that's like, oh, that's so great. But the bigger part of me was like, honey, does your mother know?
Exactly.
You should put the book down for right now.
Quick question going back to how the books have changed as you're writing both series, both genres. So you said you've deepened the relationships in the cozies. So talk about how you've propelled that series to how many books? 16 now, you said?
16, right.
Wow. Yeah, so that's a long series. So how have you done that? Because cozies, they have the limited cast. A thing that some writers struggle with is like, okay, I've written 3 or 4 books about these people. How do I keep this going?
Right. Well, I did end up adding in a few more to the cast. So the first 3 books had a kind of a smaller cast, and then I ended up adding a couple more. And so the cast has grown a little bit. It's helped that I've taken them different places. So I have a book in Ireland. I have a book, where else do I have them? I have a book where they go to Bali. So moving them around places has helped kind of keep that interesting. Mm-hmm. I think the thing that the readers really seem to like is the development of the characters and the relationships, because they do develop over time. It starts out with the wedding planner and her friends, and those are really her only family type of thing. And then there's the romantic relationship. Well, that kind of creates some tension because the best friend, who's been kind of the center, is no longer the center. So there's tension as it goes through navigating the changes that come when you add relationships.
Right.
So, and then this last book is her wedding to this hot cop. And people were just dying for it. I'm not going to lie, it's been a slow burn.
Yeah.
And especially compared to the sci-fi romance where it's one, only takes one book, but 16 books, and people are just like, oh, praise the Lord.
Finally.
They're pretty excited. But then some also have written me and said, we really like the way you develop the characters, very over the period of time. And, the relationship with it is kind of like, will they or won't they for a couple of books. And so it does kind of evolve almost naturally, like it would when their developments in characters and relationships and the people, they grow, they have to change. So, and it is fun. So, and the characters are really based on a lot of people I knew in the wedding industry. So that's also been fun.
You write what you know. Yeah.
I always say that the things that are the most wild are not the ones I make up. Like the craziest stories, those are all true.
So you have to tell us one crazy story now about wedding planning. What's the craziest, one of the craziest things that you've actually seen in real life?
Oh, craziest. It is so hard to pick one. I mean, I've seen just a bunch. I mean, I had to coordinate an elephant for a wedding in the middle of Washington, D.C. at 5:00 on Friday.
Oh my gosh.
Which downtown Constitution Avenue, which was challenging. And I ended up putting that in a book because
Nobody believed it.
Right. And then, and other livestock, and the rules on livestock and things like that you have to deal with, or, so I do put real details into the books that you might not know about, different rules that weddings have. And, I've had clients want to have miniature ponies wandering through cocktail hour. You have to talk them out of that because miniature ponies are very vicious and they bite and they nip, and you do not want them, even if they're draped in flowers,
wandering willy-nilly through the crowd. Yeah.
Right. You don't want that. And so,
no matter how good it would look on Instagram.
Exactly.
Go there.
Exactly. There's some things you just have to talk people out of. We had a bride who wanted us to glue rose petals down in the grass. She was convinced they were going to blow away. She wanted a rose petal aisle. So she wanted us to glue them. There is no such thing as a grass adhesive. We explained this. She said, well, can you pin them? I was like, well, who's going to walk on a bunch of straight pins down an entire aisle?
Yeah.
So sometimes you're dealing with the craziest things are just dealing with people's lack of grip on reality for a short amount of time.
And how people kind of obsess on one thing,
Yes.
They've laying in bed at night, they've had this fear that all the rose petals would blow away. So that's the one thing they obsess on.
Right. The job is really also just kind of almost being a counselor to people sometimes because it's just, you're really, and it is an interesting position because you're so involved in a person's life for a year and then you're gone.
Yeah.
So you really you delve deep into these people's families. You know who the drunk uncle is. You know the secrets. You know everything, and then you're out.
Oh, that's so funny. Well, as we end up, tell our listeners the one thing you think you've done to set yourself up for success.
I would have to say that I've treated the writing business like a business. So I treat it like I did my wedding planning business, and I have a incorporated, so it's I have an S Corp, and that is a publishing company, and I do everything through that. So even all my copyrights are held through the company. I do copyrights, through the copyright on my work, which I think sometimes indies don't do as much. So I try to really set it up like a business and run it as if I was a publisher. And try to also diversify. So I do the audiobooks, I'm doing German. I try to get as much out of each piece of intellectual property as I can. So because it does take, a little while to write these things. So I want them to work for me. And building that backlist and having that backlist work, I think is something that really pays off.
Right. And I think just one thing that kind of has struck me is that the first 3 books had a life.
Yes.
more than 10 years ago. But now they have a new life with brothers and sisters. And so I think that's so important and encouraging to listeners, because I think sometimes we're pretty short-sighted. I know I can be sometimes, but these books are ours forever if you get your rights back, and if you're indie, you have them forever, and you can do multiple things with them. So I think that's really encouraging.
Yes. And I think you're right. I think also kind of knowing that it's so important to keep that intellectual property and be careful what you sign and don't be lured by the offer that sounds too good to be true. Because you really can probably do more with your own intellectual property that anyone will do for you because you care about it more. These are your babies, and no one's going to really take care of them like you will.
Nope.
Yeah. That's
and it's
one of my mottos.
Come back. That's another thing. It's never too late 10 years later to come back and re-release a series, and it's brand new for most people.
Yeah. A lot of readers out there that haven't seen what we write. So
right. I have a friend that just got her rights back to 2 books, and she actually went in and rewrote some parts and made it so that it flowed in with another series that she had put out. She had put out as an indie author. And so those are 2 new books in that series that she really didn't have to do just a whole lot on. She just had to change a few things. So.
That's really smart.
Yeah, I thought it was too. Yeah. So anyway, well, it's been great having you. This has just been so good.
Yeah. So where can people find out more about you and your books?
Sure. You can go to lauradurham.com.
All right.
And we'll have all the links and everything in the show notes at Wish I'd Known Then for Writers. Yep. So thanks for listening, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast. We hope this episode inspired you, empowered you, and made you laugh a little bit too. If you loved it, tell your friends about it. And if you feel so inclined, leave us a review. We look forward to being with you again next week.